Hello and welcome. I'm Kriti Mehta and you're watching the World Report on NewsX World. Let's start with a check of the top headlines this hour. The Justice Department has unredacted names like billionaire Les Wexner, assistant Leslie Groff, and modeling agent Jean-Luc Brunel as Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirators in a 2019 FBI document. President Trump has vowed to halt the opening of the Gordie Howe International Bridge connecting Detroit and Windsor unless Canada shares ownership and compensates the US for perceived trade imbalances. The White House has updated its fact sheet on the historic US-India trade deal, removing mentions of tariff reductions on certain pulses and softening language on India's purchase commitments. The Chinese yuan has surged to its strongest level against the US dollar since May 2023, trading around 6.91 offshore, driven by a firm central bank fixing and reports of Beijing urging banks to curb US Treasury holdings. A mass shooting in Tumbler Ridge, British Columbia leaves 10 people dead, including the suspect, with over 25 injured in attacks at a high school and a nearby home. Police found 6 victims inside Tumbler Ridge Secondary School. US President Donald Trump escalates tension with Iran, threatening aggressive action if Tehran doesn't meet US demands on nuclear and missile issues. In a recent interview, Trump stated that without a deal, the US would have to do something very tough amid ongoing talks mediated by Oman. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky intends to reveal plans for presidential elections and a peace deal referendum on February 24, marking the 4th anniversary of Russia's invasion. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu reaches the US for his 7th meeting with President Donald Trump since the start of his second term, focusing on escalating tension with Iran. The emergency discussions come amid US-Iran negotiations. And we now start with some breaking news coming in. Viewers, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's inner circle is denying reports that Kyiv is preparing to hold presidential election in the coming months. A source close to Zelensky says no announcement on election is possible without adequate security, directly pushing back against a report by the Financial Times. The report had claimed that Zelensky could reveal plans later this month for a presidential election and a referendum on ending the war, possibly before mid-May, under pressure from the United States. Zelensky's term expired in May last year, but Ukraine did not hold election, citing martial law and ongoing war conditions. The Ukrainian leader has said any vote would require legal changes and strong security guarantees, including safe voting for serving soldiers. For now, Kyiv maintains that without security, elections remain off the table. Retired Major General Gigi Dwivedi, war veteran and professor of international relations and strategic studies, joins me in this discussion from New Delhi. General Dwivedi, thanks very much for joining me. It's good to have you.
Thank you, Kriti. Thank you very much.
General, now, just a short while ago, there were reports that Ukraine may be ready to hold elections as Trump now wants the war to come to conclusion, a ceasefire to be arrived before summers by June end. And now we have fresh updates that are saying that that really is not the plan from Zelensky's side. Ukraine is not ready to hold elections till security guarantees are met. Now, the question of security guarantees is crucial here because that is what on which elections in Ukraine are dependent. Do you see US and Europe fulfilling their demands as far as security to Ukraine is concerned?
Well, Kriti, first and foremost, President Trump has been insisting on the peace agreement or calling off the Ukraine war since the time he assumed the second term as presidency, that is since January last year. But it's almost a year now that no movement forward has taken place as far as the ending of the Ukraine war or any agreement on the peace treaty or peace agreement that could be signed anytime future. Now, there are a couple of issues that needs consideration. First and foremost, it doesn't appear that President Putin is in any mood to end the war, aerial, drone attacks are continuing on the Ukraine territory, and there's no let up. Even the ground operations also are going on, though in tactical nature. The second point is this is very important that until Ukraine gets a, I would say, firm security guarantee that there'll be no further aggression by Russia, I don't think that any elections can be even thought of. And more importantly, Kriti, until there is a stability, until there is a semblance of peace within the country, how can the people be voting when the bombardment is on one side, the fighting on the ground forces on the other side? Well, it's just not possible that any kind of fair and free elections can be conducted. So I think President Zelensky's stand is right that there has to be conditions before the election can be held, and until there is peace on the ground, I don't think elections can be held anytime soon, Kriti.
Right. All right. Of course, General, thanks for your comments. They're requested to stay on. There's some more breaking details coming in now. The Amiri Diwan says that Qatar's Emir Sheikh Tamim bin Hamad Al Thani and US President Donald Trump have discussed in a phone call efforts for regional de-escalation and stability. The call comes ahead of a meeting between Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu, where the Prime Minister is expected to press him to widen US talks with Iran to conclude curbs on Tehran's missile arsenal and other security threats beyond its nuclear program. Request General Dwivedi to join me back in the discussion here. General, Qatar and Trump are now ready to hold talks on peace and stability in the Middle East. Both are very important players as far as Middle East is concerned, and Iran is a hot pot at this point in time. Do you think that their talks could help bring about peace in the area?
Well, Kriti, the tensions are running high in the Middle East, especially close to Iran, because the American, Armada and the USS Abraham Lincoln and all the supporting ships are all deployed, and President Trump has been giving warning that in case the Iranian deal doesn't come through, then he may choose the military option. Now, for this, avoiding this clash, there are a number of players now who are making effort that this tension doesn't actually convert to a full-scale clash. To that extent, Saudi Arabia has made effort, the UAE is making effort, even in Oman, the talks are taking place, and Qatar is also a very important player in the Gulf region.
Yeah.
So all the Gulf countries actually are together on one issue or one page, that there should be no clashes or the military option by President Trump. So they are trying to restrain him. In fact, Saudi Arabia had restrained President Trump when the protests in Iran were at the height by the student bodies. So I think that this is one more effort that is being made, and the Gulf countries have important role to play in the stability and peace in the region. So I think this combined effort is on, and Qatar is also contributing its effort to ensure that there's some kind of agreement is reached. But there are two sticking points. One is that Iran doesn't want to enlarge the scope of these talks to include the missile constraint or missile control. And the second very important point is that on the nuclear issue itself, how far it is willing to go to sign the nuclear deal. So therefore, these issues are very important, and until there is some kind of trust built, because now there is a high degree of trust deficit, but all the Gulf countries are making considered effort so that the clash is avoided and peace is given a chance. Kriti.
Right, General. Stay on, and thanks for your comments. We have more updates, breaking news details now coming in. This one in connection to reports over Nancy Guthrie. Now, reports are suggesting that one person detained by police for questioning in the case of Nancy Guthrie's alleged abduction has been released after questioning. That's breaking news coming in. Local police had earlier stated that they had detained one person of interest and have now reportedly released that individual after questioning. The probe into TV anchor Savannah Guthrie's mother's abduction is now in its 10th day. Meanwhile, the person who was detained has now been released after questioning. Those are the latest details that we are picking up in connection to the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie, the US TV news anchor's mother. And we now move on, viewers. Now, the United States is signaling a stronger push to counter China's growing influence in South Asia, with Bangladesh at the center of its strategy. Washington's ambassador to Dhaka says the U.S. is prepared to offer Bangladesh and its next government American and allied defense systems as alternatives to Chinese military hardware. The move comes ahead of Bangladesh's general election following last year's upheaval that ousted former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina and opened space for deeper Chinese engagement. China has recently signed a defense deal with Dhaka, including plans for a drone factory near the Indian border, raising concerns in Washington and New Delhi. The US says it wants regional stability, stronger ties with the next Bangladeshi government, and a balanced approach to security and investment in the region. All right, viewers, let's invite General Dwivedi back in the discussion here. General, now, of course, the space that was left void after Hasina's ouster was taken in by China, and now the US is vying for it. How does this change the geopolitics in South Asia if Bangladesh shifts its reliance on defense equipment from China to the US?
Well, Kriti, Bangladesh is a strategically very important country, and incidentally fought the 1971 Bangladesh War. So I can give you certain ground perspective. You know, Bangladesh sits at the crossroads of South Asia and Southeast Asia, and it has got access to the Bay of Bengal, that is to the Indian Ocean. So therefore, at this time, both US and China, they want to ensure that they have influence on this nation, which is close neighbor of India. And you know, last year, before Sheikh Hasina's exit, there was talk that America wanted a base in Saint Martin Island, and that was one of the issues was contention between Sheikh Hasina and US, and which made way ultimately for Muhammad Yunus to come in. Now the Chinese have not only stepped up their presence in Bangladesh only after Sheikh Hasina's exit. In fact, China has been in this region for quite some time. In fact, if you see, the defense equipment of Bangladesh army is more or less Chinese origin, whether you take their ships, their tanks, or the ground equipment. And now they are also looking at JF-17 aircraft being manufactured and combined with Pakistan and Bangladesh. And more than that, Kriti, China has taken an economic route world over, and they have committed to invest about $38 to $40 billion in Bangladesh, out of which $7 billion have already been committed. That is the improvement of the infrastructure, establishment of special economic zones, and also developing the ports like Chittagong. So all I can say is that though America is now making late effort, in fact, the ambassador, I think Brent Christensen, had a meeting with Jamaat leaders, and making it very clear that as far as America is concerned, they would be willing to work with whichever government that comes in. But I think the American push is slightly late. Chinese are well embedded, but America will have to do major effort to ensure that the Bangladesh switches its source line or the acquisition of defense equipment from America. But it's not likely to be such a smooth transition because Chinese are deeply embedded in Bangladesh as of now, Kriti.
Right, General, that's all we have time for in this discussion, but I request you to stay on as we have more to do. Viewers, moving ahead, let's also now tell you that European Union leaders will gather in Belgian Kassel on Thursday to discuss how to improve the European Union's economic competitiveness against rivals like China and the US. With persistent productivity gaps and growing global pressures, including the challenges posed by Trump's trade war and Chinese export restrictions, the European Union is looking for ways to strengthen its economy. Leaders will explore various proposals, including completing the single market by 2028 and pushing for more common European investments. However, differing opinions on strategies such as France's Made in Europe push have created division within the bloc. All right, viewers, joining me now in this discussion is Mr. Andrew K.P. Leong. He's a China strategist and joins us from Hong Kong. Mr. Leong, please do begin with your preliminary comments.
Thank you. Well, this meeting in the Belgium Old Castle is a brainstorming session of the European member states in face of huge challenges, not only on the economic front, but on matters of security. On matters of security is the question of all the member states pooling the resources together against potential threats from Russia, bearing in mind what's happening over Ukraine. And of course, it's not just the resources, it's the capacity to build enough armament and also defenses for future, the possibility guarding against the possible Russian aggression, because the European Union has been relying on the American military umbrella for far too long, spending a tiny proportion of their budget on the military, and then devoting all their resources to improve their welfare. They've been living a very, very good life and hiding under the American military umbrella. But of course, President Trump has now punctured this fantasy, and is now, of course, pressurizing the European member states to spend more on defense, and also belittling even the NATO alliance. Meanwhile, the Russians' aggression over Ukraine is a lesson learned deeply by the European member states. So that's on defense, but on the economy, the huge potential of a united market has not been realized, even though there are common commercial policy and trading policy, but there are various other huge differences amongst the member states, which undermine the unity of a single market. Let's not forget the European market economy is the second largest in the world, and bigger than China, just behind the United States, but then assumes a fully integrated market, and this potential has not been realized. So all these shortcomings has been highlighted by the previous Italian Prime Minister, Mario Draghi's report, containing over 300 recommendations, but only a tiny proportion has been implemented. So on both fronts, on defense, how the European Union could build their own defenses, rather than the so-called transatlantic alliance, the American military umbrella, have proven to be much less reliable. And secondly, how to realize the full potential of a single market in face of all these traumatic repercussions because of the trade war and because of the rare earths restrictions. The question of self-reliance also comes into the picture. How to build manufacturing or reshoring and manufacturing back to the European member states, so that they do not have to rely too much on other countries' supply and value chain. So all these are huge questions, and then the road ahead is problematic because each member state have a different capacity and different requirements, and the political forces within each member state are also diverse. But at least the reality of a traumatic and fragmented world has now coalesced to precipitate this brainstorming session.
How long really will it take, Mr. Leong, for the European Union to come on par with China and the US. Even if it starts now, there's a huge gap that's there for it to fill.
Yes, as I said, I mean, the challenges are huge, but at least that's the first step, because all the European member states suddenly realized that they can't live in yesterday anymore, because the yesterday reliance on the American military umbrella, on a transatlantic relationship, has now proven to be a mirage under President Trump. And then the Trump administration is slapping huge tariffs on European Union allies, and even threatened to annex Greenland. I think this has been a wake-up call to all the European member states, and hence they're putting their heads together, trying to figure out how to respond on these two major fronts: the European Union's defense, relying more how to grow their own capacity, to grow their own self-reliance, but also how to realize the full potential of a single market, to turbocharge their respective economies.
Right, Mr. Leong, in fact, there's some breaking news developments that we are bringing up in this connection. The European Union viewers must tear down the economic barriers that prevent it from becoming a truly global giant. This is the statement that's coming in from European Commission Chief Ursula von der Leyen ahead of leaders' talks on making the 27-nation bloc more competitive. Our companies need capital right now, so let's get it done this year. The Commission President told the European Union lawmakers that she outlined key steps to bridging the gap with China and the US. We have to make progress one way or the other to tear down the barriers that prevent US from being a true global giant, she said, calling the current system fragmentation on steroids. All right. Mr. Leong, as you were saying, it's the first step. Von der Leyen has also issued a statement to that effect. European Union is, of course, now trying to get more capital and business investments in the country. But once again, how long will real progress, be visible?
Well, I think that all the European member states are cash strapped in a way, but let's not forget that there is a robustness of the original designed common market, and the whole European member states as a single market, if they manage to unite together, closer together, because as I said, the European Union, after all, is the world's second largest economy if they manage to fully integrate themselves. But of course, there are various barriers. But as for attracting investment, the opportunity beckons, because China is not adverse to investing in manufacturing within the European Union by outsourcing its production. For example, its electric vehicles have been very competitive, and they're putting a lot of the European car industries out of business. And that's not very good for China either. And China wants to have a sustainable and mutually beneficial relationship. So there is a long-term partnership rather than destroying all these key industries. So the opportunities are remain open for China manufacturing, car industries and others to open them to outsource part of their production processes within the European Union to create jobs, to bring economic benefits to their European partners.
Mr. Leong, thanks very much for joining us then for these discussions on NewsX World. Viewers, we now move on to some news from London, where a 13-year-old boy has been arrested following a twin stabbing at a school in North London, prompting a major emergency response and raising fresh concerns about violence in schools. Metropolitan Police say 2 students were injured in the incident and were taken to hospital with non-life-threatening injuries. Both are said to be receiving treatment and are expected to recover. Officers and ambulance crews responded quickly after reports of the stabbing, and the school was placed into lockdown as a precaution while police secured the scene. Students and staff were kept inside classrooms as a safety measure, with parents informed as authorities worked through the situation. Police said there is no ongoing risk to the public and that the incident is believed to be isolated. Directives are now working to establish the full circumstances, including what led to the attack and how a weapon was brought onto school grounds. Local officials have described the incident as deeply distressing and say counseling and support services are being made available to students, staff and families. Police are appealing for any witnesses or information as the investigation continues, and more details are expected in the coming hours. And now moving on to cover some news from Taiwan, where Taiwanese Defense Minister Wellington Koo has said that the delay of passing $40 billion special military budget against China, as President Lai Ching-te has urged the opposition-controlled parliament to approve the spending. Wellington has added that the government had an intensive talk with the US on what weapons Taiwan needs. Lai has said that Taiwan's strengthening of its defense is not because it wants to invade anyone, but because it wants to safeguard its way of life. Lai has added that China is becoming increasingly serious and Taiwan's defense budget must be passed smoothly. Lai also said that this represents Taiwan's resolve and it also shows that Taiwan is fulfilling its responsibilities as a member of the international community. Let's listen into what Lai Ching-te and Wellington Koo have said.
和平无价，战争没有赢家。台湾提升国防不是要侵略任何国家，我们只是要守护我们习以为常的生活。我们对和平可以有理想，但不该有幻象。一纸协议无法换取和平，唯有实力才能够确保真和平。备战才能够避战，能战才能够。
这个整个是一个完整的一个计划。那这个8年的预算能够通过之后，我们就有一个稳定的预算的来源。那我们将资源集中在我们迫切所需要的能力建构上面。那这一点，我们不希望台湾成为印太集体嚇阻力量里面的破口。
General Dwivedi continues to stay on with us. General, Taiwan, of course, looking for an approval to its budget, but what really could cause the island if the delay continues?
Well, Kriti, it's a well-known secret that Taiwan faces a serious existential threat from China, because Chinese leadership has reiterated time and again that Taiwan is an unfinished agenda of the 1949 Communist Revolution, and integration with the mainland is a core issue, and for that use of force still remains an option. So therefore I think the concerns of President of Taiwan Lai Ching and the Defense Minister Wellington Koo are well founded, and to ensure that state of asymmetry, because there is a huge difference between the capability of People's Republic of China and Taiwan, that this asymmetry needs to be bridged. So therefore last year the President Lai Ching had increased the budget or the spending to $40 billion over the next 8 years. But there have been internal opposition from some parties which are pro-China, and they want the budget to be curtailed only to about $12.7 billion. But the point is, in case Taiwan wants to defend itself effectively, it needs weapon systems. It needs HIMARS, that is the long-range artillery. It needs the air defense system, and especially they have proposed to install the T-Dome, that is the anti-ballistic missile system, where the Americans are coming forward to sell Patriot missiles to Taiwan. So the point is, in brief, what I can say is that Taiwan concerns are very real, and in fact there are speculations that President Xi Jinping has drawn certain timelines for the integration of Taiwan with the mainland. So therefore the threat is increasing day by day, and only last year even Prime Minister Takaichi had expressed concern that in case there is a threat to Taiwan, willy-nilly it will also pose threat to Japan. So the point I'm trying to make is that the threat to Taiwan is very real. They need to increase the defense budget. That's the step taken in the right direction. But ironically, the opposition has not been cooperating. It's for the Taiwan national interest that such budgets are passed, and they are able to acquire the weapon system they need to defend themselves from a very imminent threat.
Right.
Preeti.
All right, we'll leave it at that. General, thanks very much for staying with us this bulletin at NewsX World. Viewers, with that, let's move on. And before we wrap up the bulletin, there's some news from tech front. Now, South Korea's crypto exchange Bithumb has admitted serious flaws in its internal system after an error led to the transfer of more than $40 billion worth of Bitcoin last week, sparking a sharp market sell-off. The country's second largest virtual asset exchange said it accidentally distributed about 620,000 bitcoins to customers during a promotional event instead of 620,000 won. The mistake triggered a 17% drop in Bitcoin prices. Bithumb's CEO told lawmakers the error was caused by serious deficiencies in system controls, including a 24-hour lag in updating asset balances and failed safeguards that should have checked transfers against actual holdings. The giveaway was equivalent to 15 times the exchange's total Bitcoin reserves. While most of the assets have been recovered, nearly 1,800 Bitcoins were sold within minutes before accounts were frozen. Regulators say those customers are legally required to return the funds. The incident has reignited concerns over oversight in South Korea's virtual assets market, one of the world's most active, with officials warning that current laws fall short of applying bank-level regulation to crypto firms. Let's hear the Chief Executive Officer of Bithumb.
우선 당사의 이벤트 오지급 사고 소식으로 상심이 크셨을 국민 여러분께 진심으로 사과드립니다. 또한 대한민국 디지털 자산 시장을 신뢰해 주신 고객 여러분과 또 건전한 산업 발전을 위해 불철주야 노력하고 계시는 의원님 그리고 금융당국 관계자분들께 감히 헤아릴 수 없는 심려를 끼쳐드린 점 진심으로 사과드립니다. 이번 이벤트 오지급 사고와 관련해서 저희가 지급하고자 하는 양이 현재 저희가 보유하고 있는 양을 크로스 체크하는 그런 검증 시스템은 이번에 반영되지가 못했던 사항.
Viewers, that's all we have time for. Thanks for watching NewsX World.